Okay, guys, we have some interesting stuff to go over today. We're going to talk about Italy and what's going on there. Why are so many people dying? We're going to talk about some genes. We're going to talk about ACE2 again and what do we know about it? What can we do? Talk about some research coming up with blood types, blood type A, blood type O. Should we care? Does it matter? We're going to talk about gender, we're going to talk about LDL cholesterol, and we're going to talk about vitamin D3 and vitamin A, all some cool stuff. So let's just start off with what we know. We know that this is affecting older populations, but we also know something about Italy. Italy's getting hammered. Jordan, why don't you tell everybody what we know, what we've learned about Italy, and what we can see in the research, and why Italy may be getting hammered compared to other countries.
Sure. So there have been a lot of studies on the demographics of Italy recently because of the coronavirus. And like you just said, older populations are disproportionately affected by the coronavirus and disproportionately have a stronger response to the coronavirus. So because of that, these demographic studies have been really enlightening about the population of Italy. What these have shown is that Italy actually has the second oldest average, or the second oldest population on average in the world, right behind Japan. So it's the oldest in Europe by far. I think it was something like 23% older than the surrounding countries on average. And that could be one of the factors that has contributed to how hard Italy has been hit by this. Additionally, there have been a lot of underlying diseases in Italy, in Italian populations. There was some research that was done that showed that 75% of them had high blood pressure, and these are the people that are dying from it, not the people that are just generally affected. 75% of them had high blood pressure, 35% had diabetes that was diagnosed.
Diagnosed?
Yeah. So it could be way higher than that even. And 50% had heart disease. So obviously all of these things are contributing to this. There is other things like Italy's social norms are a lot different than the surrounding countries, including in America. They have much more close contact in their culture. I'm sure, yeah, like exactly, exactly. Like people do that all the time in Italy, where they'll grab you and kiss you on your cheeks and hug you, and they stand even closer on average to each other when they're talking to each other.
Do you know what a close talker is?
Yeah.
Have any of you ever encountered a close talker in your life?
Yeah, and there was actually research on this. They show that they stand closer on average than most other cultures. And we know that the 6 feet distance is the sweet spot for not contracting the virus. So, I mean, all those things altogether really do impact the way that the virus spreads, how significantly it's impacted, and how severe it is in that country. So those are 3 really big issues that Italy has that a lot of other places don't have. And, on top of that, they also have a really densely populated cities. I mean, Italy is very small compared to the United States, but they have 60 million people living there. And that density of the population is going to contribute to the spread as well.
Here's something else. Jordan has a friend named Luke who works for the CDC, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell me why don't you tell everybody what you're telling me about tuberculosis and where he works and the homeless population and what's going on there, and how this disease, how tuberculosis can actually, people can have it and not even know it.
Yeah, I mean, so this is more of a niche topic, but my friend Luke works in California for the CDC. He has been, obviously the CDCs have been on pretty high alert for this whole situation. People with pre-existing lung conditions, things like tuberculosis, are much more likely to die from coronavirus because it allows opportunistic infections, and tuberculosis is already a very deadly disease. Because of the high homeless populations in California, you have a huge portion of people that have tuberculosis. It could be undiagnosed, it could be asymptomatic. You don't know. If you have asymptomatic tuberculosis, you could go on for years without ever developing symptoms. But as soon as you get the coronavirus, that allows opportunistic bacteria to start developing infections and turn into all-out tuberculosis. That isn't an issue everywhere. It's more of a niche issue. If you're in an area with a high homeless population, an area with a lot of people with tuberculosis, you might not even know that. But that is something to keep in mind. If you have a history of other lung infections, a history of other things that affect that respiratory system, then you're probably more likely to be severely affected by coronavirus.
Next is, and then this just goes along with the whole underlying disease conversation, right? That when you have underlying disease and all the 12 seminars we went through, this is just another thing to consider, meaning it's super important to be healthy. This is what we mean. The immune system it's got to be strong in order to fight this stuff off. We live in a world that's dynamic and things are always coming in. So we can only control what we can control. So might as well control, our food, our sleep, social distancing, these types of things. All right. While I was, a lot of people contacted me about their ACE2 genes in their 23andMe report. I found nobody that had SNPs that were protective. And why don't we talk about why that is? Because when we started to look into Italy and what the heck is going on with Italy, and we came across this data, we also came across, hey, let's look at what's going on with Italy and this ACE2 receptor. And it turns out, what do we know?
Well, yeah, I mean, what they were saying is that there are very few people that have. So, I mean, the other thing is that we don't necessarily 100% know what is protective. Right. So I think that's also the issue. We don't. Yeah. So we don't know if it's better to have a SNP for higher efficacy ACE2 or lower efficacy ACE2. But they were saying that the distribution in Italy is very similar to surrounding areas, and that very few people had polymorphisms for lower efficacy ACE2. Yeah. So maybe that might be.
So the reason why this was a conversation, remember I talked about this a couple conversations ago with these ACE2 inhibitors. There was, and I published a video that talks about this in the newsletter. There was one conversation saying one thing, one conversation saying the other. I will say that right now, as of today, which is what, March 21st, 2020, something like that, it seems like the ACE2 inhibitors might be protective. Yeah. And so it seems more likely that than not. So those of you on those meds should probably stay on them. But also the genes, the 23andMe genes that we were talking about, very few people just in Europe and in Asia, we just don't have that protection. So there you go. Blood type has come up with blood type A, blood type O. Some recent research came out of China where it seems like, boy, are people with blood type A more prone to dying than people with blood type O. You're only talking, I think it was about 2,300 people or 2,400 people that were looked at. And just, guys, when you deal with statistics, things are done mechanistically through longitudinal studies and through populations for a reason. So you're always going to have statistical anomalies one way or the other with different variables, but this is something that people will keep looking at. But from what scientists are seeing, this is not something to really pay attention to, meaning we shouldn't be going out and checking what our blood type is quite yet, right?
There's been so many coincidences in history because of misinterpretation of correlations and misinterpretations of statistics. I mean, you can one-to-one correlate the number of drownings to the number of ice cream sales in a month. And that's the hidden variable there is the temperature outside. If it's hot outside, more people are going to be swimming, more people are going to be drowning, more people are going to be buying ice cream. So many things in statistics are due to hidden variables, are due to these anomalies and these coincidences. So it's not something to freak out about yet. There's only been one study, it's been a small population, and I was reading an article on Medical News today that was saying that there's very low quality evidence and that even the one study that did look at those 2,000 people didn't even reach statistical significance. So it's not something to freak out about.
Next, and these next couple things I really want you to pay attention to. One is gender. So females seem to be a little bit more protective. I believe the death rate is also lower.
Yeah.
And it seems that estrogen is protective. Now, why does this matter? Because you may be saying, well, I can't change my gender. But men, those of you that are 50s and 60s, or if you're being stupid and injecting testosterone into your ass in your 20s, I will tell you that you are putting yourself at risk. You're compromising your ability to fight this virus. And the amount of men today that don't put in the work to keep their testosterone levels high, because being lean, exercising, watching your diet, getting enough sleep, those are the ways that you're supposed to optimize your testosterone, everybody, not rubbing a cream on you, because that's not without downstream effects as well. You need to be doing the right things before you start putting hormones into your body. But if you're on these hormones right now, you better have a real conversation with your doctor, because that doctor, if he's being ethical, will tell you that we know that you're putting yourself at a more compromised risk. anything on that?
Yeah. So the other thing, I mean, you've probably heard of like the term like the man flu or man cold before. There's been research that shows that that's actually a thing. Like people that have higher estrogen levels, like obviously like women, have less severe symptoms from flus, from other viruses. So they do think that this is also playing a part in the coronavirus, that they're having less severe reactions to it.
And then while I talk about vitamin D3 and vitamin A for a moment, will you pull up what we read about LDL?
Yeah,
and I'm
sure.
going to have you read that. So vitamin D3, vitamin A, you may, if you're kind of into this geeky world that we're in, there's some stuff going on about vitamin D3, vitamin A supplementation. Should you do it? Should you not do it? Vitamin D3 and vitamin A happen to upregulate the ACE2 receptor, which was news to me, was news to Jordan. We looked into it. And then the question is should you stop supplementing with this? Here's the issue. You should just assume you're going to get this virus. All of the statistics say 50 to 70% of the world will get it. If you find yourself low with vitamin D3 and vitamin A in your body, first of all, you're going to suffer all the effects of having low vitamin D3 and low vitamin A, which we don't have enough time to go into. But I promise you, those are two fat-soluble vitamins you don't want to be low in. And reminding you that vitamin D3 is actually a pre-hormone, mostly in charge of your immune system, regulating serotonin in your body, freeing up calcium, really important stuff. I'm telling you that you're going to hear about this. I encourage you, if you want to downregulate the amount of vitamin D3 that you take, instead of taking 5,000 IUs a day, maybe take 600 IUs or 800 IUs while we go into the summer, because remember, you can get vitamin D3 from the sunlight. And not most of you are. I tell very few people to take vitamin A. Instead I tell them to take beta carotene. But that's something I wanted to put out with you guys and have your radar up. Anything to add to that?
No, that was good. Like I said, like you were just saying at the end, I think it's really important to supplement with beta carotene instead of vitamin A. Even if you have a polymorphism that severely decreases the amount of beta carotene you're converting into vitamin A, you can take more beta carotene. You can still saturate those enzymes that convert it into vitamin A, and it's a safer form of supplementation because vitamin A is fat soluble. It can build up. It's linked to a lot of issues if you take too much of it, more so than vitamin D, more so than other fat soluble vitamins. So I think beta carotene is the way to go for sure.
Finally, I'm going to have Jordan read something about LDL. I spoke about LDL, I think, in the first video, and maybe you should have a conversation with your doctor about your statins based on what we know that LDL does. And I'll just have Jordan read this, what we know that LDL does. What we don't know is what it does for this particular virus. But this is all emerging research, and as we piece together puzzles, who's dying, who's getting affected, what I will say is that, notice how many people are dying of heart disease, and how many of these people are already on some type of medication. Does it matter if you're on a statin or not? Well, I want you to just hear one of the many things that LDL does. Like I've said before, it is as big of a problem, I mean, some would argue bigger problem, for your LDL to be too low than too high. Now, there are certain types of LDL, and this is not the time to get into it, LP little a, it's a big deal if that LP little a is high. But many, many people will agree with me and say that if your LDL is too low, you've got a big problem, because you need LDL to make hormones, but you also need it as part of your immune response. And here's what I'll have Jordan read. This is literally right from the research.
I just want to, before I even read it, I just want to point out a couple things. One is that the LDL, like you said, we don't know if it's acting for this virus. The other thing is that this is talking about from the bloodstream. I personally would be kind of surprised if this was protective against coronavirus for that reason, because we know that it's entering through the eyes and through the mucous membranes. And it seems like it would probably get into your healthy cells before it ever was velcroed to the, as they say, velcroed to the LDL. But I'll read this anyway. It might have some type of implication for this. So LDL, in a sense, acts as a velcro to pathogens, binding to them. Just like a security guard tackling somebody trying to cause harm, lipoproteins appear to be able to do the same with bacteria, viruses, and even some parasites. By binding to the pathogen in this way, LDL can block its entry into our cells, leaving the pathogen vulnerable to clearance by immune cells. So there does seem to be a binding of the LDL to pathogens, certain parasites, certain bacteria. We don't know how significant that is yet. We don't know how that it's affecting infection rates. I mean, people with high LDL, like in general, seem like they are more sick in general. So it's obviously not stopping infections completely, but having the right type of LDL might be important. Having optimal amounts of LDL might be important.
So I didn't expect this to go into a bigger conversation. Yeah. So let me address that, because Jordan and I are now having a conversation. So I would argue that it matters how the LDL is getting high, right? So LDL is like sending the firefighters to the fire. Like your body's LDL raises for a reason. And much of the time it's from this low anti-inflammatory response that we've been talking about. You keep doing all this stuff wrong, you get that steady gradual inflammation. We talked about mitochondrial dysfunction and that oxidative stress and how this maps onto long-term illness, because we know that if you want to map one thing onto aging and problematic disease, it's inflammation, right? And how is that happening? Through these pathways that we know of, right? It's not just one thing, it's many things. So one of the things that the body does is it raises LDL. So some people are genetically high in LDL. There's genes for that. And I would say if you're just genetically high in LDL, I wouldn't worry as much about that if you're eating clean and you're doing everything you're supposed to do, and you just have genes that map onto high LDL. Now, if you have genetically high LP(a), you should know about it. You're going to be disturbed to find out that there's almost nothing you can do about it yet. Within 5 years, I guarantee there's going to be plenty of things to do about that that are going to be really, really cool. But the point is that LDL does its job, and it's supposed to send the firefighters to the alarm. So do you agree with that?
The alpha, yeah. So the LDL(a), the alpha version of the LDL, it's bad, right? We know that it has a lot of problems, but the LDL itself is not the issue. What the issue is when the LDL becomes oxidized and damaged. It's not going to cause any damage at all. If you could have skyrocketed LDL, as long as you have enough antioxidants in your bloodstream to protect it from oxidation, it's not going to cause damage or build plaques. So if you're eating a clean diet, even if you have genetically high LDL, it's going to be protective. You're not going to have to worry about that. I just think that...
and there's a whole conversation about HDL, yeah. And that's also genetic. There's a bigger conversation. I don't want to go into that. But point is, we want to get you guys what we know, what we hear, what we're learning, and keep you ahead of the curve. Let me just do this. Let me get my Italian heritage out. If you know somebody, all right, that can benefit from this information, please send it out. Love you all.